Welcome to the Global Discussion, discussions with creatives, leaders, and thinkers. My name's Simon Hodgkins, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Heather Cooper. Heather, you're very welcome to the podcast. Let's begin by asking you a little bit about the world of AI, creativity, design, images, all that good stuff, because I know you have a particular passion and interest in this area. So maybe let's talk about that a little bit first, Heather. So maybe for our audience, tell them a little bit about what you're doing in this AI world and why you find it so fascinating.
Well, I create visual content, and I'm a content creator on Twitter. And I love visuals because they tell a story. They make it more equitable for information. So it crosses barriers and obstacles with language, culture, education. And that way people can see and visualize things 60,000 times faster than text. So I was always into that that aspect of it, and I like leveling the playing field. I like equity for people with disability, with different conditions, or even just people who are busy. It helps them to have a visual reference. So AI, at first I use the common AI products that everybody's using: Siri, Alexa, Grammarly, those types of things. They're just so commonplace and they come in handy. But then when AI art or image generation came about, I started noticing that, and I really enjoyed learning how to prompt and how do you get these images, what order. I was kind of obsessed with the order of the prompt. Do you have to have a subject first? Do you have to do, an action after that, a color, descriptor, the lighting? So I was already pretty involved with that. Then when ChatGPT came out within a day or so, I just noticed, because I saw somebody else on another site, I think it was TinyWow actually, he was mentioning how this could be really great in order to write, blog articles. And I write on Medium. And I thought that would be interesting because I like to find tools to help create content, period. So I know that SEO formatting and things like that would help increase with that. That would be pretty helpful to get ideas for an article. Or even, I didn't believe that it would really be able to write an article. So the first time I tried it, within a day or two of it being available, my mouth hit the desk, and I couldn't believe like what I had in my hands. It was kind of like a treasure that I just like, I've never experienced anything like that in my life, where I thought something must be wrong. Do we have this much information available to us right now? I can't think of any other time in history when this has happened. So I kept kind of just going through different things and asking different questions. And I saw the potential immediately, because I said, oh, this could help anybody. And especially because of the way I feel about opening access to everybody. A lot of people, you're held back because you don't have access to information. So how do you access it from ChatGPT or any type of AI? How do you talk to it? How do you pose a question? How do you structure? What do you want to know? Can you plan it out? So that became a new focus. So learning how to talk to GPT, or just generative AI in general, period. Learning how to communicate with it and work with it and to create. I wanted to show people, you don't have to be a machine learning data scientist, or computer science, or anything like that. You don't have to be a videographer, have a ton of experience. Just learn. There are tools out there that can do this for us and that can help us get there. And there's a lot of free information out there with people like myself, even just creating content. There's a lot out there to understand. So most of the editing tools, they include AI, the best editing tools for resizing and different things like that. So there's just so much potential. And I want to teach people who they don't have a background in design like myself. I don't have a background in art. I'm a healthcare professional who likes to do this and create content. So that makes, I want them to understand, if I can do it, you can too. Let me give you the tools to make it happen.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Heather, because you've touched on a very important part there. And on one hand, we've got this wealth of information almost in the palm of our hands if we're holding a smartphone or if we're at the keyboard. We've got access to this vast amount of information that in human history, we haven't been able to interface with that amount of information in this sort of more human way, in inverted commas. And it's true, though, you do need a little bit of understanding about how to, as you say, structure a prompt. Now, some people listening to this will know what prompts are. And there's people out there selling prompts and super prompts and mega prompts and everything else. But there's other people that won't quite get that. And the closest I've got to it is it's somewhere between just talking as a regular human and then people who maybe know how to code in software. There's a certain way that if you sort of instruct the AI to do things in a certain manner, that you'll get better outputs from it. So how would you explain that to, say, somebody that isn't doing what you're doing, isn't using tools like Midjourney or GPT-4, ChatGPT, or other generative AI tools? How would you go about sort of framing that, just so people can understand exactly what you mean? Because it's that human interface into AI that you have to get right at the moment.
Right. Now, that's a very good point. And first, I would tell people that some people try to test it to see if it's giving the right or wrong answer. And that's not what the purpose of it is. It's not necessarily even just to give us information. It's a large language model, the ones that are the generative AI, and they are learning through human conversation and through interaction to have a dialogue. So just as if you were talking to another person and you wanted to find out information, you'd have to structure your question to them in a certain way, or they're probably not going to be able to give you directions to get to the actual store that you want to go to or the school. And to think about it in that way, where it will give you back what you ask, but you have to think about maybe the way you're structuring what question. If it's an open-ended question, it depends. You might get an answer. It could be in another direction, and there's use for that also. Sometimes it's just a brainstorm, but to find out, say for instance, which battle was fought in this war, for the particular, you might want to give them more details and what was the background to that, because that's information that this AI has available. Basically anything on the internet, and that happened up until 2021, possibly 2022 now, I'm not sure. I think they've gotten a little better. So think about what if you were able to walk into any library or whatever, and for something like that, well, how would you go about looking for that? What is the subject? What is the topic for what's the setting? You want to set the scene. You want to have a question and the setting, where like the scene or the reason behind it or a feeling. And then you can tell it how you want that information. So if you wanted to summarize, an article that you're reading, and if you don't have time to read it, you want to ask it, please summarize this with the most important points in bullet point. I want a quick read in less than 100 words, and say that. And what about, and then you can ask questions for follow-up questions after that to say, could you explain what this sentence means? You can drop copy and paste it, or just say, what do you mean by this particular thing within that document? So it's not cheating, where you're just it's sort of like you have a personal explainer or tutor for most of the things. So if you have a question about how do I get this to work, I want to put this together, how would I find out how to put this bicycle together? What's the make and model of it? And ask it in a way that it can give you the information you need. If you don't ask it the question clearly enough, then it just gives you a vague answer or something. It's just trying to fill in a little space there, and it'll tell you when it cannot answer that.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, it's almost as though you have this super assistant working with you on a 24/7 basis, available to you anytime, unless the servers aren't overloaded, but I haven't seen that in a while. And I
Yeah.
know some people are paying for access now to overcome that certain challenge.
But it still happens even with that.
Yeah. But it is incredible. And it is mind-blowingly good. And it's one of those things that the more you sort of get used to working with it in a particular way, the more it surprises you. At least that's my
Oh,
sort of
absolutely.
response to it. But I want to ask you a little bit about the art side of it as well, because in terms of the written word, it's extremely powerful. And yes, there are cautionary tales, but in the grander scheme of things, it is an extraordinary tool. But what about AI and art? Because when you look at the early adopters in this AI field, as in the users, I mean, the people, the
Mhm.
early adopters that are at that beginning of the bell curve and now have access to these tools, the sheer quality of the images that people are producing, the video frames that people are producing using AI, it is staggeringly good. And I know you
Yes.
know a lot of people in this space and see this on a daily
Yes.
basis, right?
Yes. Yes, also for just basic image generation, since it hasn't even been 6 months, I don't think. I think I started using the image generators around July, maybe August or September. Actually, it was pretty late last year, but the way that you would get things that were okay, and faces and humans, you probably didn't want to go there if you could help it, because that could be scary. But the quality of it just kind of accelerated over. It took a couple months. It was pretty basic, but then slowly but surely it got a little bit better, a little bit better. And now, yeah, it's amazing. I cannot believe that I can type in something, and there's so many different generators. And that it's the type of quality that you can get from this with less prompting too, because the more people that are using it, you don't have to be super specific anymore. You can be pretty vague. They have in Canva, that's people, how many millions of people use that? That's one of the shortest descriptions, the text description or the prompt that's just describing what you want to ask or what you want to see. And it's so short, you don't even have to have a full sentence, and it will produce an entire, thing, an entire image for you. It could fill up the screen or whatever. And I think that it unlocked a lot of creativity with people. And that is the probably the best thing about this, is that everything now, I look at it with a creative lens, even more so, not just what kind of content can I create. It's like, when I see an image, I wonder what that would look like with animation, or if I had this background, or if it had this music. And if I wanted to write about something on Twitter, maybe, how could I get people to pay attention to it? I have had visuals with everything. That was already a draw, but now it's like, you don't just want a visual. How can I really grab them? What kind of visual will grab them? And it's a rush, because you see your imagination that you might not have been able to visualize it yourself. But when you see something on the screen that resulted from your prompt, it's amazing, because you feel like your creativity is unleashed. And I hear that a lot, unlocked and unleashed, but it truly is. And it's a very good feeling. So it's not maybe sometimes dopamine and it's a endorphin rush, but it's just so satisfying to be able to see something you created. And it's kind of close to, I learned how to code last year. The first time that I saw my hello world was like, what? And I was hooked. It's kind of like, well, I don't want to learn how to code, but you saw I did that on the screens. What else can I create? And that's kind of how this is too. But it's amazing how you feel like not an artist, but creative.
Yeah, it's a great point. And you mentioned Canva. It's a great tool. Lots of people are familiar with Canva, and their latest update at the time of us recording this really has jumped forward with AI. And I think the other one that springs to mind for me is Firefly, Adobe Firefly. They put a lot of work into that, and they used a different data set, obviously, because they're very much into their own imagery and data to
Yes.
train the engines, etc. But even so, the ability to use AI in things like Photoshop and other Adobe tools, it's staggeringly good. Things that would have taken me or others or creators or designers hours and hours of work, you can now, to some degree, just say, I want this, I want that, and it will
Mm.
do it within seconds. It is staggeringly effective. And of course, Midjourney 5, you took me back there, and you sort of have to remember that it was only sort of half a year ago where we were all
Yeah,
struggling with fingers on human hands and
right.
distorted faces, and now
Well,
it gets it right 90% of the time, 95% of
yeah,
the time. It's pretty good.
it is good. And it is not just Midjourney too, and I try to put out a lot of information about all these other generators because I was intimidated by Midjourney, as I'm sure a lot are. And Discord is a whole nother beast altogether once you get used to it. But the vast majority of people just aren't doing, they're not going to do that. So when you have things that are free, there's so many free image generating tools, and they're embedded into a lot of platforms that people use for other purposes, like Canva or Creative Fabrica, different sites for just regular image editing. I think Shutterstock will have theirs. I mean, just think of all the things that people use, like it's in school graduations and inviting people's Christmas cards. At Microsoft Designer, that is just amazing. I got access to that in December, and that's another thing. You just type a word in and it starts building your document card invitation, and it'll start giving you ideas of what to use along with that. You put a picture in and it'll say, hey, here's a layout for you, instead of just the standard templates. It helps you think of ways to lay it out. But yes, the
Mm.
way that these sites have evolved is amazing. And I thought that this would be much more expensive, but I think there's enough out there for people to use. You don't really have to spend any money to do this at all.
Yeah, it's a great point, Heather. And I think in March 2023, the amount of AI tools that came onto the market was staggering. I mean, I think that's the busiest I've ever seen it. But it still continues,
Yeah.
in the subsequent months, because somebody asked me the other day, what do you think about all the alternatives? And I'm still going through months ago, things that were released that I haven't even done yet. And, you get early
Mhm.
access to a few things and you jump onto that, etc. And it is incredible. And I think one of the newer developments, although by the time this airs, it probably won't be a newer development, but there are other engines now that can remember and have more of a mid to long-term memory. So you're not creating a new sort of discussion. I know you can go back to a discussion or a thread and you can add to it and change things and it will remember, but the sort of long-term memory and that more human feeling, the way you can talk to a human, say, do you remember we spoke about that thing a year ago and we did this and we went on that trip? AI is sort of, some people are building on top of the engines that are there and the large language models that are there in order to provide that level of long-term memory. So it will remember and almost become this personal assistant where you can jump in at any time, that sort of jumping in and jumping out. And maybe we move away from prompts in the future and it just becomes like natural language, doesn't it?
Yeah, and that's exactly what's happening, because the natural language processing, it's learning, and that's what the point for a lot of things were, but it also will help us, and it is learning more and more where you're not going to need that much of a skill in prompting, because it's going to be able to you don't have to be able to articulate yourself as much for it, and it can kind of infer what you would like to have, and then it's up to you to decide whether or not you want that information is correct. But it's funny that you say personal AI, the personalized. Just yesterday, personal AI. I that an app that will be basically your memory stack, is how they described it on the live launch. And just seeing it like that, thinking about it like that, like, well, today it's personal AI. This particular, that's the name of the app. And you just train your own memory and provide information to stack onto the memories you want it to have. And it can even interact with other people for you, where it can ask, they can just talk to my personal AI, and I have a separate avatar for her to answer them. But think about, that's it. Again, today it's April right now. By July, I really, I don't really know what to say. There's just so much out there, and it's like every month it's going faster. The advancements, it's like lightning speed, where there's so many people working on this, and there's so much creativity out there, and people that are actually solving problems. That's the best part, that we have all this. And yeah, it's fun to have this type of thing, but you are, even for AI art, the way I use it, it's productivity for me, because I can produce so much information, so many different images that I can use across Notion, or this, I can use it as a web, something that I'm going to put up content. I can use it as a cover for a book. I can use it for my headline image for a Medium article. I can use it for family to, make cards, or to give them something special. There's just so many little things that I can do with it. And you could say, well, my son, for graduation pictures or something like that, why should I buy them? I'll just go ahead and, I got the digital file, I ordered that, and I can make it into whatever I want, posters, t-shirts, whatever. There's just so many different things you can do with it.
Yeah, it is rapidly changing. And who knows where we'll be in a few short months. And I put out a post recently, imagine this in 3 years or 5 years or 10 years. It's scary. It's exciting and scary all rolled into one.
Yeah.
But there's so much going on. And I think the word that you used there, I just wanted to pause on for a moment. I think productivity, people that are actually diving into this, the productivity gains are incredible. And I was looking at the recent AI report from Stanford that came out very recently at the time of recording. It's the 2023 AI report. And, there's a lot of examples in there about just talking to people about how much productivity gains, and people are saying 70%, 59%. I can't remember the stats exactly, but extremely high levels of productivity. It's saving so much time in terms of getting tasks done. And the other thing that I think we should mention while we're here, Heather, is AI for good. And you were sort of talking about that at the top, and about leveling the playing field. I know there are parts of the world and people in some situations where they're not part of this AI world at the moment, but it is going to help us to level out things, to solve more problems, to produce better answers. And I just hope that we can really focus on that AI for good, because there's enough doomsayers out there around this AI world, isn't there?
Yes. And it's kind of like, the way I see it is, there are always going to be bad actors, and there's greed, and there's people that are just doing it for whatever capitalist reasons or things like that. But you can have it design an NGO for you, give you an idea there's things that I think there's going to be so many things that come out that it will offset that. And it may not be, I don't think you could ever have an even balance, but the type of things that are there, that the ability to do different things with this, like the visual, controlling things with your eye movements, to think of the medical implications for that, or for people. I was really involved. I like accessibility, web accessibility, particularly for neurodivergent people, or people with neurodiverse conditions, and ADHD, dyslexia, autism. And just the smallest things can make their experience, the user experience, a lot better. You just the way you structure your text and the way you watch your speeds and the types of background colors and patterns. But for those type of people and others that have dementia even, or they have Parkinson's, people might not be able to access a laptop or the keyboard or a mouse. So those kinds of things would help for those people too, so that there are other ways they're not going to have a touch screen necessarily. You can help them with accessibility with that. But the advancements for medicine, for education, for, if you have kids that they don't have a parent that could be at home helping them learn how to read, and you can talk to your book, the things that it's not going to take the place of humans, but there is so much that can be done with this. And it's just the productivity and just solving problems. I had it create a spreadsheet for me for my taxes. I was recently trying to figure out business taxes, and I wasn't sure how to get the columns correct. It said, "Oh, I'm sorry, let me correct that for you." That was nice touch. But just something like that, talk about saving time, I was able to create a very functional Excel spreadsheet complete with formulas. So in order to get that, plug in that information, it's like, well, here, try this, try that. Just little things like that, where that's not my job, but it sure saved me hours of doing that. But I think there's so much out there, because we're almost right at the tip of discovery for a lot of things like cancer, understanding dementia, what causes it, what's happening. With AI, there's more that it can go further and say they are close to figuring something out. If they just need a little push there with a little additional information, or with the processing that the analysis that GPT tools can provide to get you to that last step discovery.
Yeah, you make some excellent points, Heather. And who knows? GTP 6, 7, 8, and 9. It's hard to get your head around where we're going to be, but I think you've made some excellent points there. Thank you for sharing that. And look, while we're still in the human world for a moment, let's talk a little bit about learning styles. Do you like to read books? Do you like to listen to audio? Are you constantly scanning the internet for information on AI? Or do you just like going for a coffee and talking to people? Like, how does the learning work for you in today's busy world?
Yeah, it's funny because I am a lifelong, I've read since I was like 3 or 4 years old, actually, tons of books, novels. And I used to read a lot of current events, lots of news, and different things. I've watched a lot of news and different shows. But in the past couple of years, that's kind of died down a little bit, because the tone changed a lot. And once I started creating not full time, but once I started creating content, especially on Twitter, since I primarily used Twitter before for news, I didn't realize there was a whole nother segment of it that is not talking about the news of the day. Unless it's related to those topics on writing and entrepreneurship and that marketing. So I find myself where I consume a ton of content, and mostly from Twitter, from Medium, things like that, different articles, but I can absorb a lot very quickly, and I can kind of file it away in my mind for later. So my learning style now is, when I learned how to code, it taught me how to learn. I learned how to learn things that, through processes and documentation in order to produce something. So now that I understand that and I know what to look for, when I'm looking, the way I learn how to use these tools and different things like that, there's a certain way where I know, well, I can always go to the docs and, check this out, or even the FAQs or whatever, and YouTube, supplement it with YouTube videos if I need to. That is very helpful. And these AI summarizers are extremely helpful for that. But I mostly kind of just go through, and the things that I'm interested in, or things that are kind of related to something that I might be doing or talking about, I can absorb that and just go through, but I don't know what's happening on most current events a lot of time, unless I'm kind of on the periphery. I figure if I need to know, I'll know.
Yeah.
If there's like, if
That's
it's
probably a
time to
good
go
thing,
vote.
Heather. That's probably a
Yeah,
good thing.
that's it's definitely improved my mood a lot. But yeah, I go to different, and I also try to go to several sources to kind of back up, like fact check information, because I don't take any, like the way somebody is describing these tools or the way they're using it is different than another person, and may not be wrong, but there's different that I learn visually, but also kind of analytically. If that
I
makes
like
sense. I'm
that.
kind of,
I
I'm
like
both.
that. I was talking to Liza Donnelly, who's a New York Times cartoonist, and she talks a lot about creating a whole story just from one image, and sometimes with a twist of humor or a twist of satire. And I think learning through imagery as well is such a powerful medium because it's instant, and you can take in a whole scene and a whole story just from an image, or a feeling you can get from an image. And I think that's a real good opportunity. And I think you also touched on education a little bit, and almost that relearning of how to learn and how to go about things. And I think we could do a whole podcast series on the education, what we're learning in school today versus what we need in the real world, and the change to the future of work, and what this AI means to all that. That's a whole other day's discussion, but you've touched on some really important points there. Another thing I want to squeeze in before we run out of time, Heather, is a little bit about your journey in terms of people that have inspired you, people that motivate you, people that look up to you, and or any advice that you've got or that you've picked up along the way. What springs to mind when I ask you that?
Well, people that perseverance, and I have a lot of people who've influenced me for different reasons in my life. And my mother, for instance, she had breast cancer twice. Once when I was a little girl, she in her 30s. Then she had it again when I had kids. 30 years later, she's still here. But I remember growing up and watching her get dressed, and she had a prosthetic, a breast, and the way she would carry herself, you would never know. I knew, like, the way, you hold your head up, you keep going. I didn't see her crying and things like that. I'm not saying that that's good, but she was an educator, and both of my parents were educators. They met in college, and as they were becoming teachers, getting their degrees. Then they ended up working together with disadvantaged youth that were incarcerated, but going to high school. But my mother, an excellent resource for that. My father, he believed in everybody. He was the one where he didn't care. He's like, you could have messed up, you could be in jail, but you can do things later. He ended up going to other high schools, public high schools after that. And he has people that they won Olympic medals there because he told them. The one athlete, he told her in ninth grade, he had her come and meet me. And he said, this is my daughter. She does very well. If you study, you can be like this, but you're also really good, a good runner. You can do well. You can win. You can beat, whoever in the world. She went out there and did it multiple times, gold medalist. But he didn't get anything from that other than saying, like, I told her, I knew she could do it. So believing that everybody has potential for greatness, it doesn't matter what your background is, and you have the potential, you use the skills you have. So both my parents, in different ways, they influenced me. And I lost my train of thought, but that, and also my kids, I have one daughter and three sons. And I want them to see what it means, like when you want to learn something. When I was learning how to code, they thought, Mom, when are you going to come out there? But I had to get it done. I didn't want to fail, and I wanted to see it through. And I knew that it would be beneficial later. And I wanted them to see that, like I always tell them, anything worthwhile, it's gonna cost some kind of way. You're gonna have to it's gonna hurt sometime, and it's gonna cost. So that type of thing, it's been my mantra.
Well, thank you so much indeed. There's some wonderful examples there with your mom and your dad, and I think, having to put the work in sometimes and learn new things, I think that's a great trait to share with people as advice. So thank you, Heather. And I suppose the last thing, as we come to the end of our time together today, although I feel we could talk for hours and hours and hours, I just want to ask you two quick things. Number one is, have I missed anything? Is there anything else you want to mention? And if not, that's perfectly fine. But also, if people want to connect with you, where do you want to send people to, Heather?
Well, I would like to send people to my newsletter or Substack blog. I'm very excited about the things that Substack is doing as far as opening up. It's making it more, they have short form now, notes, their podcasts, audio, video, and cross collaboration with other newsletters and the other writers. So I would encourage everybody, I'm going to put more content onto Substack that will be more detailed. Things that are too heavy or too much to put on Twitter. I would say Twitter first and then Substack. I do write on Medium, and I have quite a few articles on there. So I'm trying to, as I automate more with my AI, continue writing more on Medium, because if I can write an article in about 20 minutes now, especially, shorter form article. I've been able to summarize it, and that's me writing, not the AI. But if I know what my headers are going to be and things like that, I can get it done faster. But I'd appreciate, Twitter, Substack. It's at it's Heather B. Cooper at substack.com. And I have a newsletter called Visually AI, and I'm going to develop some more products.
And on Twitter, what's your handle on Twitter, Heather?
At HB Coop _.
At HB Coop _
Bravo Charlie OOP _
Yeah. Well, that's great. So look, head over to Substack and Twitter to check out everything that Heather's doing. Heather, I want to thank you so much for being a guest today on the Global Discussion. I want to thank everybody for watching or listening to our episode and our discussion today. It's been fascinating to dive into this whole creator world of AI. Thank you so much. Make sure that people like, follow, subscribe, do everything I need them to do to help support this podcast. And I hope that they'll meet me back here for more discussions with creatives, leaders, and thinkers. So thank you, Heather. It's been lovely to talk to you today.
Thank you, you too. I really appreciate this, Simon. It's such a cool opportunity. It's my first podcast, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Heather.